Good morning, everybody. Some of you actually like sports ball, so I figured I could jump in and give my opinion on the college football playoff. Wherein the selection committee just made their picks for the first college football playoff selection committee. Uh, Probably most of you will disagree with me, but that's why I'm doing this, and you're not. So let's get into it. So this is the remaining 14 that I have in the hunt. If the craziest things happen in the world, some of the weirdest things in the world happen to happen, these are the teams that I think still have a chance to be in the college football playoff. Not a very good chance, but still have a chance. Ohio State Buckeyes, Florida State Seminoles, Oregon Ducks, Washington Huskies, Georgia Bulldogs, Texas Longhorns, that gross team from south of the Great East Lansing, Alabama Crimson Tide, Penn State Nittany Lions, Oklahoma Sooners, Ole Miss Running Rebels, Air Force Falcons. Yes, that's right. They're undefeated, and they're in the Mountain West. I mean, Notre Dame Fighting Irish and the James Madison Dukes. I understand that there's a lot of those that I'm giving a lot of credit to. A lot of credit to. And realistically, there's probably about 8 left that have an active shot. But I figured this is the first one. Let's make it fun. They do 25. I can do 14. So my breakdown of in the hunt teams by conference: the SEC, Big Ten, and other all have 3 representatives left in the. If everything went perfect, the Big 12 has 2, the Pac-12 has 2, and the ACC has a lone 1. So now we're going to get into the rankings. So this is where I have them ranked. I ranked the top 10 because the last 4 I don't think even have a chance on the coldest day in hell, but figured I'd throw them in there anyways. No ranking, so they're not the top 10. I'm doing this one time with this terrible maize and blue garbage. Michigan cheated. The evidence piling up. They saw this individual on the sidelines at the Central Michigan State game, illegally, allegedly. The evidence is really starting to pile up, and I think they're going to be in hot water. Jim Harbaugh started this year suspended. Probably going to be the same again next year, and they'll have a couple game bowl ban going forward. And last but not least, the most important part: Michigan sucks. Eat a dick. So now we're going to actually get into the rankings. This is the one only and last time I will put Michigan anywhere on any of these lists. I just knew if I didn't put it, people would bitch. Number 10, the Ole Miss Running Rebels. They lost to a weak Alabama team. Close, but lost to them. Likely they're going to lose to a weak Georgia team. They certainly like to play upset Cinderella, but they're just not able to break through. They're the Penn State of the SEC. So I think you have them at number 10. I think they have an outside shot if they happen to be Georgia and some crazy stuff happens. But the reality is the Rebels are not running into the playoffs. Number 9, Oklahoma Sooners. If they're in the table, they still might not be in, but they didn't, and they won't from here on out. So the committee hates the Big 12 for whatever reason. Somebody pissed in somebody's Cheerios at the committee office, but we've seen it time and time again. The Big 10 or the Big 12 has to literally do, something crazy like walk on water to make it into that playoff. And I think this year would have been much of the same. I think you have multiple teams that are undefeated in front of them, and I think it would have been a hard sell to get the Sooners into the playoff. They were trending in that direction, but I think there's some upstart teams, and no matter what the Sooners did, they were going to be on the outside. Number 8, the aforementioned Penn State Nittany Lions. when you lose to the University of Michigan and Ohio State University, you're just not going to make it into the playoffs because one or both of those teams might make it above you. Uh, they played better this year, but they just can't get over that. They can't get into that upper echelon of the Big Ten. Uh, they get stuck somewhere in this general area every single year. Play really well, beat up on kind of the mid to poor teams, and lose to the elite teams in the conference. So, and they'll do so again. They'll make a top 10 finish, probably a prestigious bowl game, but that's going to be about it for the Lions this year. Number 7, Roll Tide. Alabama Crimson Tide. They've had an incredibly off year. They've looked very beatable. They've been beat, and basically how we've seen it for since the playoffs started, it's either Bama or Georgia, and like I said, Georgia will have a loss, but Bama will get a second in the SEC championship game if they make it there unscathed. They have some big games coming up, some games that could be an issue. So we'll see what happens there. But there's no way Alabama gets in. They're gonna make a New Year's Six bowl and be on the outside looking in. They might get as high as 6 or 5 in the traditional playoff college football playoff graphic thingy, just for recognition's sake, but they're not getting into that top 4. The Texas Longhorns. Looks like we're going to have to wait another decade to declare that Texas is back, because they're not. We've been hearing for years upon years, Texas is back, Texas is back. Well, they're not. They again choke in big games. They can't pull it out. And for a team like them, outside of, I mean, they have the brand, they have the recognition, but for a team like them, they're going to have to go undefeated and run the table, win the Big 12, because again, they're in the Big 12. So I don't think for much longer, but at least now. And Ewers is, for all intents and purposes, is leaving this year. Their quarterback, so they'll be starting over. Number 5, the Oregon, we have cool uniforms, Ducks, quack, quack. The Pac-12, which won't even be a conference next year, is much like the Big 12. If you don't run the table and do something impressive in the offseason, you're probably not making it into the playoff. They looked really weak in that Washington game, and Washington is not a power school. As you can tell, they probably made the top 4, but they're not a traditional power school. So they're really going to have to do something spectacular. They're obviously going to have to run the table, all that kind of stuff. So I think Oregon will hang out in this 5-6 range. I think they'll probably drop one more game. And yeah, I think that they'll get one of those New Year's Six bowl games, maybe the Rose Bowl, and that's going to be the best they're going to be able to do this year. Number 4, Florida State Seminoles. All right, so the top 4, the playoff teams, I have a little bit more of a breakdown than just the traditional overview of a top 10 list. The Noles have some interesting games, not against ranked opponents, but we all know the in-state rivals in these big games. They can flip on a dime, and weird things can happen. So the Noles left on the schedule have Miami and Florida and the Gators. They're at Florida, home against Miami, so there could be some shenanigans. I think they're heavy favorites in both, given that they're just the simple facts of the ranking, and we've seen kind of the crumbling of Miami and the Florida Gators this year. So I think that it's very likely that the Noles run the table and make it into that college football playoff. So here's what we have looking at here. Passing yards, Jordan Travis is their quarterback, 2,100. Benson has 544 rushing yards, and Keon Coleman, the former Michigan State Spartan, has 538 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. They don't do anything exceptionally well. Their offensive passing and rushing yards are towards the middle to the end, but they get it done. You can see points for is 5th in all of college football. So they don't do anything exceptional. They just take advantage of where they're at on the field and score points when it's needed. Got a pretty good defense, top 20 defense. I think that defensive number will start going up after they face better competition. Like in the playoffs, they're not going to stay in that 18.3 points against. That will go up. They're going to be in a track meet, and we'll see if they can put up 40 against Georgia's defense. Don't think so, but maybe. And then the last thing I did for the top 4 is an X factor. Yeah, I'm still salty that Keon Coleman left Michigan State, but it probably wouldn't have made any difference anyways since we're falling apart and crashing and burning. Keon went to Florida State, and he has been a standout. He has been spectacular. He catches anything thrown to him and really been impressive on the football field. So that is your number 4 team, the Florida State Seminoles. Number 3, Washington Huskies. I think you have week on week. So you have Pac-10 or Pac-12 and ACC. You have two pretty weak teams that are going to make it in because they did exactly what you asked of them. They're going to win out. They'll win their respective conference games, and I think they'll get the job done. I think the Huskies are a solid team. We saw what they did to my Michigan State Spartans. So here's a little bit on Washington. They have conference matchups in all 4 of their remaining games. And as you can see by the numbers, they have 3 ranked opponents. I think that once you get in, and if they don't drop any of these games, I think if they do drop any of these games, it's chaos. But if they hold strong and beat the Trojans at SC, then they come home. Utah, I think, is beatable. And then Beavers always make things hard. Always. So Oregon State could be a challenging one. And then they finish up the year with their in-state rivals, Washington State Cougars. So they have Beavers and then Cougars to finish the year. So could be tough for the Dogs. So when we look at statistics, Michael Penix Jr. he transferred from Indiana University. He is a left-handed quarterback. He throws a beautiful ball, and he's racking up the yards, 2,945 with 24 touchdowns. They have a decent running game, and Roma Dunze has been a pretty spectacular wide receiver, 907 yards and 7 touchdowns. But he spreads the ball around. He gets it wherever it needs to go. And that's evident by the fact that they're leading college football in passing yards. They do nothing on the ground. They're near the bottom, 119th, but they put up points in bunches. They have a pretty poor defense, especially out there in Pac-12 world, where I didn't even know they still played defense. But so again, when you get into higher powered offenses with better defenses, I think those you could almost get the inverse, and it could look messy. But they beat everybody that's on their schedule. They've done everything that you can ask them to do, and done so in convincing fashion. I think they get the nod to go into the college football playoff. This X factor was easy. Michael Penix Jr. He has he has been a rock, the stability of all stability in Washington. He's been a fantastic quarterback, and frankly, he's been fun to watch. He he's punishing. He makes the throws. He stands in. He's a big quarterback with a big arm, and yeah, he should make an NFL team really happy next year. Obvious X factor. Number 2, because I think Georgia's going to drop one. They've got close. We'll look at their schedule. I think that they might drop this Mizzou game. So, all 4 games left are conference matchups for the Georgia Bulldogs. Mizzou is a tough team. They're going to be a tough out, and they're still fighting for New Year's Six game or a prestigious bowl game for the first time in quite some time. Ole Miss is a spoiler. They always seem to come up and knock somebody off as they're about to reach the peak there. I don't think they do that. I think realistically Georgia probably rolls against Ole Miss, but who knows? Stranger things have happened. And then Tennessee, Vols suck. Nothing more than nostalgia. See Texas. So I don't think Tennessee has anything even remotely worth looking at on the field. So, but that being said, SEC matchup could be, and then you have Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech should be a walk in the park also, but then you have to account for you have a very tough SEC championship game that will probably be against Alabama. Here's how they match up. Carson Beck is efficient, very game management style, very much like Stetson Bennett was. 2,462 yards and 14 touchdowns. Dijon Edwards, running back, is pretty average, 556 and 8. And then Brock Bowers, the big tight end, 567 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. As you can see, they're kind of up there in the top 10 for the most part. So their passing yards are pretty high. Their rushing yards are pedestrian, kind of middle of the road. But then points for and points against are right there in the middle of that top 10. So they're a balanced team. And I mean, they're Georgia. The SEC is a different animal. The X factor is the head coach, Kirby Smart. I think it's going to be just business as usual for Georgia. They got to the Natty, they won one, and I think they're just gonna carry that through. So, number 1, the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'll be the first to admit, they haven't looked great all year, but I think their X factor is the X factor of the entire league. All 4 games left are conference matchups. We have Rutgers, Michigan State, Minnesota. All 3 are going to be tune-ups, walk in the park, try something new, don't release too much of the playbook, and easy wins. All that matters never has is beating Michigan in the game. So that's going to be a matchup for who makes it into the playoffs. And like I said, I think the boys in blue are probably out because of their cheating scandal. So I think it's going to be a fun matchup, and Michigan snuck in and took a couple of the last ones. So hopefully the Buckeyes come back and turn this one on its ear. So Kyle McCord, he's been decent, 2,100 yards and 14 touchdowns. Travion Henderson, 457 and 6, hasn't had to run the ball a whole hell of a lot. Now we have Marvin Harrison Jr., 889 yards, 8 touchdowns on 48 receptions. He is their everything. They're tied for 15th with passing yards. Rushing is very low, but like I said, they haven't had to do much of that. Points for, they are not great, but as we always see, they have the number 2 defense in the land. So they know how to play defense. They know how to do things timely. And this has not looked like a great year, but I think it can end being one. Their X factor. The X factor of all of college football. I think the single-handedly best player in college football, wide receiver number 18, Marvin Harrison Jr. If you haven't seen Marv play, please do yourself a favor. This man catches anything and looks that man is for real. Like, that man is absolutely for real. He doesn't mess around. Marvin Harrison Jr. So this is what the playoff picture looks like in my eyes. We have 3 undefeateds: Ohio State, Washington, and Florida State. I again think Georgia drops a game at some point. And if I had to pick, I think that you could see who I'd like to see: Ohio State, Florida State. Who will probably see Ohio State, Georgia. So, could be fun. Could be a fun playoff to watch. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for now. Things can change. Things will change. If we all knew what tomorrow's going to be like, then we would definitely go betting some money. But yeah, for now, I think this is what it's going to look like. So I'll check in next week with an updated list.